Hi, I'm Kat Moore, and I am so excited to share with you the lessons I've accidentally learned about loneliness and belonging sitting in a strip mall Starbucks in Los Angeles having 10,000 coffee chats over the last decade. Because loneliness can be horrible, and a sense of belonging can determine so much of the quality of our lives, even the length of them. So I know each of our stories is totally unique. But wherever you're at on your social journey this moment, if I've learned anything in 10 years, it's that you belong. It is the first fact of your existence, even if, like me, you're still in the process of experiencing the truth of that fact. So I'm lucky to be the director of belonging at the University of Southern California, and I was brought in to innovate solutions to a loneliness crisis in Gen Z, the loneliest generation. Yet half my life ago on that campus, I was the loneliest person there, eating my waffles alone in the cafeteria. And like 87% of current students in higher ed, I was scared to make friends. Loneliness had been part of my experience since I can remember and had somehow even become part of my identity and way of being in the world. Through college and beyond, I sat in cafes across the US and Europe, talking to no one, the seat across from me always empty, and even a laptop sticker on my computer that said, "I'm in love with my husband," as in, don't even try to talk to me. But the truth is, I was numb with sadness. I didn't have the emotional literacy, though, to name this experience of feeling trapped in a snow globe as loneliness, let alone the skills or confidence to express it to anyone but the dead philosophers I was reading, trying desperately to get them to tell me why I felt so miserable and what to do about it. It wasn't until I was 28 years old, pregnant, and sitting every day in a Starbucks in LA that something small but magical happened to change everything. For the first time in my life, I was creating a sense of belonging with my own body from the inside out for someone, as the baristas and regulars were creating that space for me. And I realized I'm wired for this. I'm capable of connection. So that simultaneous connection from within and from without provided a hairline crack in my snow globe that opened a new life for me and for thousands of others from every walk of life. Felt like Dorothy stepping from black and white into Oz. So who here has a belly button? This is our physical proof that we all came into the world in a relationship of interdependence, literally tied to another person by a cord, tied to a whole family history, set of landscapes, traditions, jokes. We're all wired for connection, and we never stop needing these ties. As we move through our lives, we're looking to create secure attachments of joy, intimacy, respect, mutual support that come to form the matrix of our being and our becoming. And we do this in the same way that a caretaker bonds with an infant, and as I was experiencing organically with my son Noah and then the whole cafe. We bond by slowing down to make space for each other, giving our attention, holding the whole of who each other is, and extending specific care in the moment. At the cafe specifically, through the unglamorous micro gestures of friendliness like smiling, listening, asking questions, sharing my table, giving out homemade muffins, something bigger and better than all of us was being born: community. Turns out everyone was searching for flashes of real connection in the crush of life, places to remember our natural state of being woven together. So as I slowly became comfortable interacting, I grew excited to get to know the living autobiographies of people, and a line started forming at my table in the 3-minute latte window as coffee's brewed. People just wanting to have a place to breathe, take a load off, laugh, be heard. This unorchestrated community of strangers started spilling out of the cafe, taking on a life of its own and turning into family-like relationships. Finally, lo and behold, I was happy. I was living out of the flow of this daily cafe community and wanted nothing more than to fold in every other person who walked through that door. So when USC and other organizations approached me to innovate solutions to a loneliness crisis, I realized this need extended far beyond me and my little cafe. For as particular as our lives are, we share a human and historic context, one that's aching with loneliness and the longing to find our way home to each other. So how do we do this? Well, bit by bit, the bird makes her nest is the French proverb my friend Olivier told me over cappuccinos. And it applies to how we also weave our relational nests in the tiny moments and tiny spaces that we're already in. So what is this shared context? Well, belonging is our most basic human need, and meaningful relationships are the number one source of our happiness across our lifespan. Loneliness is also not new. It's a part of the human condition and a form of social pain and hunger that we all experience at some point in response to not getting our social needs met. Lately, it has reached crisis proportions, however, globally. 1 in 3 adults in 29 countries experience it regularly. Yes, exacerbated by the tech revolution and the social isolation of the COVID era. It impacts every area of our life. Think about work. Half of employees or more are lonely. 40% say that they have to hide their true selves at work. Think about our health. It increases our risk of conditions like depression, dementia, heart disease, stroke, early mortality. 2/5 of seniors say that TV is their primary source of company. Loneliness also disproportionately affects those who are already marginalized when we look at things like income, education levels, health, and more. This is an issue of social wellness as well as social justice. So now what? How can we take this context and work with our social natures to create belonging as we are where we are? I want to share with you the lessons that I hope are transferable for you from the cafe that we accidentally learned that changed our lives. Then I'm going to suggest 3 simple starting points for us to create belonging where we are. So the major thing I learned, like I said at the beginning, is that you belong already. And yes, we can learn to create the experience of belonging for ourselves and others by being present as we are where we are. Belonging is not something any human being or system can give or take away. Belonging is your birthright and a fact of your existence. We can call this bare belonging. The thousands of people sitting down at my cafe table, for example, I was discovering the truth of their belonging and then mirroring it back to them. I was not granting it. Sadly, our lived experience, though, may be a series of asterisks. You can belong if this, if that, if not this, if not that. What does that do? That constrains our belonging and leaves us riddled with insecurities, narrowed selves in order to fit in, and even traumas of exclusion and abuse. We can start to create our sense of belonging by acknowledging the fact of it as a human right and a facet of all of our personhoods. The German poet-philosopher Goethe goes even further when he says, when we see people this way, we enable them to become their best selves. Next, the main thing I learned was that we need diverse and deep relationships to thrive. Think of the image of a nest, nests of belonging that allow us to experience the fact of our bare belonging, find purpose, survive crisis, and establish just communities. We need all kinds of connections with people, not just a lot in number or a lot of one kind. Weak tie acquaintances, unlikely friends, mentors, mentees, anchor friends, people across the spheres of our lives. We often, however, don't know what we're missing, do we, in getting to know each other? I mean, I sure didn't realize how much and who was on the other side of my snow globe waiting for me. But it was this group of wildly unlikely friends that opened me up to worlds of wisdom and came to form a social safety net for me and my son in the wake of a family tragedy. These are people I would not have picked in a lineup of my people. Ross, the 80-year-old LA River expert and Ukrainian refugee. Candace, the author who rode a bike named Ernest. Shelley, the crystal healer and former Israeli sergeant. These were some of my magical friends. We can embrace the dimension of magic, I learned, in how we come to resonate with so many different kinds of people. Musician Sufjan Stevens says, "Blessed be the mystery of love." And we can choose to live into this mystery and approach each encounter with each other as full of unknown possibility. Next, I learned that we all need to be cared about, no matter how put together we appear. Few people look lonely, as we get real good at hiding it from ourselves and everyone else. No one suspected just by looking at me at the cafe that I was frostbit with loneliness. I realized that CFOs, quarterbacks, filmmakers, moms, everyone needed what I did. A place to not have it all together. A place to figure stuff out in our own way and time and be encouraged in the process. Thoreau notes how rare this is. He says, "I hardly know an intellectual person even who is so broad and truly liberal that you can think aloud in their society." Thank you for listening is the number one thing in 10 years people got up from my table and said. Not thank you for your advice, Kat. Dr. Augsburger notes that being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. So we may worry that people don't want us to initiate with them, even though they usually do. This is a phenomenon called the likability gap. So we can become aware of that phenomenon and overcome it to message care in a few seconds of time simply by making eye contact, waving, or otherwise acknowledging someone's existence. Just looking at someone has been found to decrease both people's experience of loneliness, even just in passing. And let's please not dismiss the power of small talk to show we care. In 3 minutes, all of my relationships started at the cafe by breaking the ice, literally tapping each other's snow globes. Small talk does not have to be insignificant. Tiny things done sincerely can be the one crack that shatters the whole globe and can be an act of kindness for people who just may need a slower on-ramp into trusting interactions. Next, I learned that conflict can be a path to closeness. It can teach us boundaries, empathy, and forgiveness. So this Starbucks was not a utopia, it was filled with humans. So our differences, past hurts, limited understandings can all cause friction in relationship. But isn't this inevitable as we get close to each other? So if we can come to expect conflict, we can look for ways to move through it as a gateway from pseudo-community into authentic community. Right? And this helps us not just default into ghosting each other, pretending things are okay, or attacking. We can become fluent in how to repair the ruptures, give and receive forgiveness, and create clearer shared expectations and boundaries. When I showed up, I had zero reconciliation skills at the cafe. The steepest learning curve ever, realizing that we all have a shadow side, and not everyone is trustworthy, including at times myself. I don't know how many times, for example, I gave a ride to Javier before realizing he was just using me to not have to find parking at work. But I grew in my ability to not take everything personally and to give people the benefit of the doubt. I learned how to tell when someone was being immature, just operating differently than me, or was genuinely dangerous. I learned when to put in effort and when enough is enough. And finally, I learned that through healthy community, we can learn to befriend ourselves. Sometimes the hardest person to befriend is the one in the mirror. Our self-compassion class at USC fills up in less than an hour. Loneliness within ourselves can be one of the hardest and scariest experiences to face. This loneliness from self is the most painful kind. Finding our way home to ourselves, however, is a communal effort. We cannot bootstrap or bath bomb ourselves home. It's in the matrix of loving, imperfect community that we come to experience the fact of our belonging and then have the resources to heal, learn, live out our unique purposes, and gain the courage to descend on safety ropes into our solitude and learn the truth of our belonging for ourselves. To, as Plato invited us, know thyself. After building grassroots community in the cafes of LA for 10 years, caring about so many people and seeing 10,000 sets of eyes look back at me in kindness, I could finally meet my own eyes in the mirror and see what they saw. I could agree, oh, it's true, Kat, you belong. And from that deeply connected place of befriending ourselves, we can show up for each other with a richer quality of presence, free from insecurity. So the 3 gateways to help each other out of our snow globes of loneliness into belonging. First, if you're feeling lonely, make yourself tappable. Put yourself in a public space by volunteering, trying out a group or event a few times, or just being in a high connectivity environment that works for you. This will allow, over time, new connections to find you. Second, if you want to create belonging for those around you more intentionally, Embrace the power of your presence and initiate. So you're going to tap. You're going to, whatever their response, tap people and initiate and share your relational resources. Invite them to your groups, even if they're not direct friend potential for you. Ask, are you finding community? How can I help you? Third, for all of us, an experiment called All the Best, where we come to actively wish everyone we walk by all the best, orienting ourselves towards wanting good for them, noticing their existence, and involving ourselves in their fate. This trains us to be open and ready to care, rather than fearful and ready to reject. So at the end of the day, people won't remember what we said or did. They'll remember how we made them feel, Dr. Angela reminds us. And there's nothing we need to experience now or ever more than a sense of belonging. So when we wake up tomorrow, we get to decide who we want to become and how we're going to show up for each other. Jane Addams, my hero and the founder of modern social work, claims that the measure of our social ethics is whether or not we turn out for one another and at least see the size of each other's burdens. The power of our intentional presence with each other, far from being nothing, is everything. So what impact do we want our presence to have? This particular Starbucks closed its doors 10 years after they opened. I was there on opening day, alone in a crowd, and I was there on closing day, surrounded by dozens of newfound family. They gave me an honorary apron and the table and chairs where I'd raised my son and discovered my vocation. They'd given me the greatest gift of all, a place to just be, to belong, and eventually to become a Wi-Fi hotspot of belonging everywhere I go. So if this could happen for me, a once lonely introvert in a strip mall cafe in LA, it can happen for you. We get one life, and what's more worthy of our blood, toil, tears, and muffins than greeting each other in the daily grind with a posture of you belong.